friend called me with some good news to share. About a month before, she had received the worst news possible. Her child had died unexpectedly, tragically. And after that initial crushing shock, she tried to make sense of what had happened. And as part of her healing process, she, like many of us might do, began to look backwards to and through the past. In her attic, she found a forgotten gift. She called it her treasure box. There were no diamonds in it, no wads of cash, but it was mostly old photos and handwritten notes. It's a type of stuff no one would want to steal, but is priceless to you. The forgotten treasure box was not a vault, but a repository of memory. Everyone might benefit from having one. She wanted to share with me one treasure in particular that she had found, and she read me a prayer that was given to her by her aunt. It was printed on yellowing paper, the frame was cracked, the glass was broken, but to her, this may have come straight from heaven. And she said, "Lord, make me an instrument of your peace." I recognized it immediately as the first line of the prayer of St. Francis. It's towards the back of our prayer book. After we prayed it together over the phone, we talked about what that meant and her recent loss of a child. She told me that she'd heard this prayer many times before. It was not the words, not the prayer, but the connection that it represented. It was an expression of love over time from her family member. And prayer, in essence, is connection. This gift, she said, was her aunt's affirmative response to the questions that she kept asking herself in her grief. Do you see me? Do you understand me? Do you love me? To the woman who lost a child, this gift was a tangible yes. Now, there is great sacramental expression, great power in a sacramental expression of yes. To some, the sacramental expression might take the form of a wedding ring. It might be a bishop's election. It might be in the reception of the Eucharist. To say yes to someone is essentially a form of recognition. It's an acceptance, an understanding, a blessing upon them. The event, the relationship, the person has meaning and value. And that's what Jesus is doing in these stories we hear from the Gospel of Mark. His actions, his presence, his healings are tangible expressions, sacramental acts to show love, that people are valued and have meaning and belong. That's what God is like, and that is how, too, we are called to be. There are three stories in a row that demonstrate this. Taken together, they offer a profound expression of the nature of God. Rather than a deity of thou shalt not, as we sometimes think, ours is a God of emphatic yes. The first part of the story, the three linked together, is found just before what we read today. Jesus went by boat to the eastern side of the Sea of Galilee. Sea is generous. It's more like a lake. It's about 8 miles across at its widest point. And it was a land of foreigners, of Gentiles, of strangers. Their culture was more Greek than Jewish. They were called the Gerasenes. We know this for several reasons, one of which is that there were pigs there. Swine were considered by the Jews to be ritually unclean. They would never eat them nor even touch them. Jesus, the story shows, was among foreigners. He's on the wrong side of the tracks. And while there, a man possessed by demons, an unclean spirit, saw him and ran up to Jesus. And he was living among the tombs where death was, cut off from everyone. The Greek word for where he lived could be translated as the space between spaces, or an empty place. This man was nowhere and alone. Those who were around tried to lock him up. He could not work. He suffered from mental and physical and emotional anguish, and he had so many problems. His demons were called legion. Jesus saw this man that no one else wanted to notice, the one they wanted to lock away. And he cured him, healed him of his unclean spirits to give him new life. And that's where today's reading picks up the story. Jesus left that event and crossed in the boat to the other side of the Sea of Galilee, to his own people, the Jews. Now Jairus, he met there, was a leader in the synagogue, and he approached Jesus. Notice he's so important, he gets a name in the story. Jairus was Jewish, presumably well off, part of the religious establishment. And no one in the religious establishment was supposed to have anything to do with Jesus because he associated with all the wrong types of people. That is, everybody not like us. But none of that mattered to the parent of a 12-year-old girl who was dying. Jairus was desperate. This was his last hope, and Jesus healed her and gave his daughter new life. In the midst of that hopeless situation, you'll notice it interrupts one story with another. Another was taking shape. A woman who suffered from bleeding, hemorrhages for 12 years, saw her one chance to be well. Maybe this will work. She was desperate. So she slipped through the crowd in confusion and reached out and touched the hem of Jesus' garment. Maybe she bargained, if I touch God, I can be made whole. This woman was Jewish. She probably had a family and friends, but they were nowhere to be found. And she had been to all the doctors, that is, she tried everything, but all that had happened was they had taken all her money. Now, being sick for 12 years would exhaust anyone, but it's actually much worse than just this physical illness. Her condition made her ritually unclean. As some might say, she was illegal, cut off. Because of this, she was not allowed in the very synagogue that Jairus might have led. She was cut off from family and friends and reduced to begging, and anyone who touched her would become ritually unclean. She was taking a great risk, violating all the rules to try to reach out in hope to touch this rabbi. It would make him ritually unclean. Everything and everyone she touched was defiled. Imagine going through that for 12 years with no human contact. Many of us just spent a little over a year isolated. Imagine what would happen if you had to do 12 years just like that. No one saw her or wanted to see her or understood her. What would she do? What would you do? She did the only thing she could. She reached out for God and was healed. Now, separately, these three stories on the two sides of the lake are quite weird. But together, they begin to develop an image of who Jesus is, who God is, and how we are called to be like. Do you notice what happens when you see all three stories together? The accounts of healing include male and female, young and old, Jew and Gentile, kinsman and foreigner, rich and poor, clean and unclean, religious and not necessarily so. The point is that no one is left out. Jesus recognized each of the three people as individuals and healed each of them. Jesus saw them when no one else did, understood them when no one else did. You saw that the woman who was healed gushed out her whole life story and told him the truth of everything. And Jesus loved them when no one else did. He recognized them not as members of a group or something by accident of birth, but as human beings, as individuals, as a man possessed, as a desperate father, and a woman alone. His actions proclaim to each of them, you are a person with dignity. You are a child of God too. You belong in the kingdom. And all three are made clean. All three are made worthy. And all three are tangible affirmations. Do you see me? Do you understand me? Do you love me? And Jesus offers an emphatic yes. We as a church are called to carry on this same ministry in the world, but especially in our neighborhood, right where we live. We are called to share our treasure and bless those around us by our presence, by word and actions, embodying the love that Jesus did. We embrace everyone as the same, as if Christ were standing right in front of us, the friend, the immigrant, the enemy, the stranger, the one who is just like you and the one who isn't. Do you see your neighbor? Do you understand her? Will you love him? Amen.